should I stay here and keep doing this, or should I pick my head up and see what else is out there? But I think at the end of the day, when I was evaluating, like, do I want to stay or do I want to do something different? I dug deep to try to understand, like, what am I really motivated by? I am motivated by teams. I am motivated by watching amazing talent build amazing things and like trying to figure out why are they so great at building those amazing things. And watching like really talented people crush jobs. Like that's like my favorite thing in the world. And I realized that kind of level of engagement is really hard to do at a big company when you're a really senior person.
Welcome to Brick by Brick. I'm Rishi Taparia, co-founder of Gruta Ventures, and today my guest is my dear friend Mike Smith. Currently the co-founder and general partner at Footwork, an early-stage venture fund, Mike also happens to be one of the most highly regarded and skilled operators in and around commerce. Prior to co-founding Footwork, he was the president and COO at StitchFix, where he joined as employee number 4 and over 10 years there held most of the senior roles at the company, from COO to CFO to interim CEO, and eventually took the company public in 2017. Prior to joining StitchFix, Mike spent almost 10 years building out the e-commerce and multi-channel offerings of Walmart at Walmart.com, eventually growing to be the COO of the $5 billion division. Mike also sits on the board of Ulta Beauty and Herman Miller. Mike, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here, and you and I go so far back, and it just feels like a fun conversation with a good friend.
Well, it's exactly what this is supposed to be. And, honestly, in building out brick by brick and thinking about who we'd love to have, you were top of that list for me. And so I'm so excited to finally get to have this conversation with you.
Let's do it.
So let's jump in. Before talking about Stitch Fix, though, I wanted to talk about Walmart. Walmart.com has been described to me as a startup within a big organization, the HQ in Bentonville and the .com team sort of being on this island here in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. I'd imagine the cultural differences of the two organizations being pretty big. How did you navigate those differences, and what did you do to build trust within HQ while at Walmart.com?
The truth is there were differences between the two organizations, but there were similar core values and principles, I would say, that kind of ran across Walmart.com and headquarters in Bentonville. And those were like things like the idea of the core values of Walmart Inc., which were respect for the individual, striving for excellence, and serving your customer at a really high level, and doing it in a humble way. And I think that those things were similar across Walmart.com and stores in Bentonville. There are differences for sure. We were a smaller team. There were a lot of MBAs in Walmart.com. There were not as many MBAs when I was at the division at Walmart corporate. And there was probably a little bit more ego at Walmart.com than there was at Walmart stores. But I think the way it worked is like, both groups getting to know each other in your own environment. And the way it very specifically worked for Walmart.com is most of the senior team, like directors and above, spent a lot of time in Bentonville. And that was the only way to really understand kind of the culture that had been built over 40 years, now obviously, 50 or 60 years, and understand sort of like what drives someone to build the Fortune 1 company, and really respect that. And the only way I felt like you could do that well was actually be in person in Bentonville, get to know the senior leadership team. And that's what I think the most senior people and probably the more successful execs at Walmart.com, they would spend the time in the home office.
Makes sense. And so, you were at Walmart.com for over a decade. You've saw the massive scale. I mean, this is the biggest company in the world.
Yeah.
What skills did you learn? What characteristics did you develop while at Walmart that you found, looking back, helped you find so much success at StitchFix?
I think the biggest one, and might feel really obvious, is like execution. I mean, I think when you are running Walmart stores or like all of Walmart Inc., on the margin profile of the company, like you actually have to execute at a really high level in merchandising, in store operations, in logistics, in everything you do in order to make the math work. And I think like when you get to see again, the world's, number one retailer and number one company execute across, at the time when I was there, it was like 4,000 US stores and 10,000 stores across the globe. And you could just see like how important like every detail, when, people that have been in retail a long time talk about retail as detail. Well, Walmart takes that whole retail as detail to a whole new level. And I think being able to kind of see that up close and personal, being able to sort of take the best practices of what true high level execution looks like, and bring it into an early stage company was probably the biggest lesson that I got. Now, there are downsides to that lesson where, I probably as a leader didn't think as big and was more about just like executing than I was about sort of vision at times. Fortunately, we had a CEO and founder who was exceptional at lots of things, including vision. So we had a good partnership there. But I do think that it was sort of execution was the key thing that I got to see at Walmart that really helped me. I think helped StitchFix, frankly, but also helped me as a leader be a differentiated and hopefully a good leader when I was at StitchFix.
Were there playbooks that you saw at Walmart or and approaches to problem solving that you felt like you brought to Stitch Fix?
I think the biggest one was just starting really early at Stitch Fix, this idea of having a weekly review meeting with key metrics that you were holding yourselves and the team accountable to execute on a weekly basis. And I think it at Walmart, I felt like at times it was a little bit carrot and stick in the way that we did it. And I don't think it was as effective as it is just like being super clear on what good performance looks like, great performance and exceptional performance. And in a weekly meeting, being able to discuss like for things that are just good or you just miss, like let's not spend time like talking about those things, but where you see exceptional performance or you see something that was a real big miss, driving this idea and playbook of like it is okay to talk about the things that aren't working or the things that are really working, and just being clear like on the things that are really working, make sure that we understand how repeatable that is and like drive the repeatability there. And then on things that aren't working, like making sure that you have clarity that next day on what you're going to do to not have that show up again. And that was just, I think, a really important thing in just daily and basically weekly review meetings at Walmart that we started at Stitch Fix in the very early days. And it was a little bit hard for people to get excited about that because it felt like we're so early in our trajectory. We're just starting. Like, why are we starting these kind of weekly review meetings? But I do think it helped us execute at a really high level at Stitch Fix and just build this muscle of kind of report out accountability, talking about exceptional things and talking about things that we need to work on.
Now, it makes sense. The feedback loops get tight and you get to improve on a week to week basis. And so now let's rewind all the way back to 2012 when you and I actually first met.
Can't
Shout out
believe
to
it. It's so good.
shout out to Ed Zimmerman for connecting us at a barbecue, and we started doing our South San Francisco coffee chats. Lots of people talk about making the jump from BigCo to startup, and you actually did it. Now, talk to me about that decision making process. How did you ultimately choose to go from the largest private employer in the world, I think, to a company with exactly a deck and a dream?
Yeah. I mean, there was one is the obvious forcing function of getting passed over the CEO job where you're like, should I stay here and keep doing this? Or should I pick my head up and see what else is out there? But I think at the end of the day, when I was evaluating, like, do I want to stay or do I want to do something different? I dug deep to try to understand, like, what am I really motivated by? I am motivated by teams. I am motivated by watching amazing talent build amazing things and like trying to figure out like why are they so great at building those amazing things, and watching like really talented people crush jobs. Like that's like my favorite thing in the world. And I realized that kind of level of engagement is really hard to do at a big company when you're a really senior person. Like at Walmart, the difference between me and the people that actually did the job, there were like 7 layers in between me and that the people that actually did the work. And in an early stage company, there's no layers. I remember Katrina once when I came into a one-on-one and asked her if I could hire a director of operations. And she's like, you're the director of operations. You're the associate in operations. You're the COO. Like you have to do every job. And I just started to recognize that being in a big company, in a big job, and being so far away from the work was not what motivated me anymore. And it made me think about like, okay, I think going to an early stage company where I could actually get my hands dirty again and work was what I was looking for. Now, I think the company I joined at the stage I joined was definitely earlier than what I thought what I was going to do. But I just am not a big company person at the core in terms of like the way a lot of big companies operate. And so I just went seeking my next adventure and wanting it to be, a smaller company, frankly.
Well, and so there's a difference between earlier stage, Series A, Series B, Series C,
Yeah.
smaller than Walmart, and then going as early as you did in joining Katrina. How did you evaluate those various options? And was there something about Katrina and the opportunity that really helped you hone in on, yes, this is what I want to be doing?
Yeah, it was really her. So I'll back up a second. Like it was an amazing market for early stage companies that were doing really cool things that were looking for like a senior exec or a number two. So I got to see some amazing founders that I won't name on the podcast, but like spent time with really amazing founders back in late 2011 and early 2012. And so when I met Katrina, I think the thing that stood out for me about how amazing she is and was at that time, there were two. Sort of bucket one was just like super, super clear on strategy and vision and differentiation of what she was trying to build with StitchFix. And I believed all of it. And then the second, kind of more in the intangible bucket, was really vulnerable and honest about what she thought she was good at and where she wanted help. And I always talk about this Venn diagram of humility and smarts not having as much crossover as I would like in the Bay Area in particular. But I do think she had it like, oh, she had so much crossover between being humble and being really, really smart that I was just attracted to. And as she talked about vision and strategy and what she wanted to build and just how she showed up as a person and a leader, I just wanted to be on her team pretty much from the first meeting.
And a lot of people are startup curious,
Mhm.
but similarly don't know if they necessarily have the skills or the wherewithal to join, or conversely, oh, of course I can do this early stage thing. You should, hire me, pay me lots of money, give me a lot of equity to help join the team early and scale it. How did you identify and get to comfort with your skill set being
Mm.
the right one for Stitch Fix at the time, if you did at all?
Yeah, I did get comfortable that I was the right person, but I also got a cold dose of reality the first 6 to 12 months of the difference between conceptually what the job's going to look like and what working at an early stage company is, and reality of like what practically it is. Because it's a lot different when you're talking about it in an interview process than when you start. So I got comfortable because of the things that she told me, like, okay, this is a retail concept. Okay, I'd been at Walmart for 9 years. This is apparel. Okay, we had an apparel business at Walmart, so I kind of knew the apparel margins and knew kind of what we could do at Stitch Fix. We want you to be the COO and run operations. Okay, I ran operations at scale. So those were all things that I'm like, seems like a sweet spot for me. The things that weren't a sweet spot is like, you're going to have to hire hourly employees. I've never done that. Like that's what, other people at Walmart did. So like there was a discomfort, but also an excitement with like learning and doing the things that I wasn't able to do at a bigger company. But I will tell you, and she says she doesn't remember this, but like the first 12 months, I struggled. It was hard. It was a lot harder than the conceptual version of joining a 5-person company. I was like trying to do all these things to help us. I was like all active, but probably not focused on the right things. I definitely had to adjust from, sort of a bigger company with a lot more resources than we had. But I don't think I ever acted above it or wasn't willing to sort of admit mistakes in those early days of like how that transition wasn't easy for me. And fortunately, she was really patient, and my peers and the whole team was really patient with like not just like running a big company person out in the first 6 to 12 months, and believing that the energy I had to figure it out would come through with actually figuring it out, which I think I did.
Well, and it sounds like a lot of that was built upon your relationship with Katrina as well. And I mean, you guys worked side by side for over a decade, and most of these CEO, founder, president, COO duos don't necessarily last that long. I know from our conversations in the past, you put in a lot of time and work to build and work on the relationship together. What's the balance between letting a relationship naturally evolve and proactively working on it?
I think so much of that question comes down to the individuals and how they want the relationship to go. I, so, of course, you want the relationship to be one that's, the foundation is trust and it's differentiated skills, but that are accretive to whatever the problem is you're trying to solve. Um, Having done it with her, I would say 80, the balance to answer the question directly is probably 80% organic and 20% planned, because in the first 6 to 9 months I tried to plan everything. I tried to like, I need to speed up our relationship getting to this trust-based place, and like her really feeling like I was, a really senior person that could have big impact. And I was doing all these inorganic things in order to speed up the trust. And at one point in a one-on-one, probably 6 months into it, I knew I was driving her crazy with this like speeding up. I can be helpful. I can be helpful. And I just asked her, I said, "Hey, am I driving you crazy?" She goes, "Yeah." And I said, what do you need me to stop doing? And she said, "Stop talking to me about fundraising. Like, stop talking to me about how you can be so helpful in fundraising. Like, I don't want your help on that." And that was like a cold dose of water that's, kind of hit me in the face of like, you cannot just, sort of, figure these things out in like a playbook. Like, some of it is just organic. Like, do your job, do it really well, build trust through like being excellent at your job, and then get invited into more of a trust-based relationship with understanding more of where her needs were and what the company's needs were. And I was trying to do it in an inorganic way, and it didn't work. And I finally was just like, I just need to have this one-on-one with her to find out what's not working. And she wasn't shy about telling me what wasn't working. But we figured it out, and I stopped talking to her about fundraising. And I think our relationship from like probably the 6 month mark on was just deep, full of trust, with some intentionality around spending time together, with some intentionality around talking about tough topics, to sort of go deeper on the trust level. And I just saw her last week, and I just feel really kind of blessed that we got to work together for over a decade and work on something that was amazing, and obviously was her, the business that she wanted to build.
Well, let's talk about that decade part,
Yeah.
because that is so fascinating to me, and it's such an amazing story, right? Conventional wisdom: hire the people for the stage of company you're at. They'll grow with the role, and then either they continue to go and scale themselves, or more likely they move on to the next opportunity after a couple of years, which is why you see, tenure at startups is typically that 2 to 3 to 4 year mark. You spent over 10 years at StitchFix and grew it from, a couple of people all the way to over 10,000 people, publicly traded company. And so much scale had to happen on the company side, but also for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
How did you successfully grow within Stitch Fix and continue to up level yourself to see that whole journey through?
I think the main way that I did it was through mentors. I think mentoring is like a super important thing. Obviously, you and I have talked about it. I consider you a mentor. I've never done venture before. You've done venture for a number of years. And so, I just am like shameless in seeking mentors, as you know. And I think the way to scale yourself in these jobs is to try to find someone that is further along than you, like in their journey. So we were a seed, just had raised a seed round. Can you find someone who's a Series A or Series B COO who you can build trust with and share honestly, like what's working and what's not working? And then have them just give you some best practices that some you can apply and some aren't right for your business. And that was the biggest key for me, is being shameless in seeking what I call mentors that are, maybe not in the same job that I am, but just super smart and not afraid to tell me like when I'm doing something dumb. And then peer mentors, which, people like Eric Colson and Jeff Barrett, where I could just be like, hey, I'm trying to do this in the operation and trying to be this way as a leader. Anytime I'm not showing up that way, are you going to tell me? Yes. And them being like, again, not shy about telling me when I was failing as a leader or in my function. And then obviously Katrina, like, I think she just was an amazing teacher, an amazing visionary, and she had superpowers in ways that I did not. And so I think when you surround yourself with these people that actually care about me as a person, actually knew my strengths and weaknesses, had the courage to tell me if I wasn't doing something great, but also were had some grace when I screwed things up. Like that's, I think, was the biggest, the cocktail that allowed me to scale myself as a leader. I remember very distinctly this story, where Katrina came into a one-on-one that we had, and we were talking about someone on our team who wasn't scaling as a leader. And she just had like this visual, this hand motion where she said, hey, if the business is growing like this, we as leaders need to be growing at like this rate. So 2 to 3 times what the business is. And if we aren't doing that, she said, like, we can't keep our jobs. We should not keep our jobs. And I think that level of accountability and that level of understanding of scaling yourself as a leader forces you into saying, like, what I'm doing today is actually not going to work 6 months from now or 24 months from now. I actually have to figure out ways to get ahead of the business scaling. And obviously, if the business is the underlying business is scaling really fast, that means you have to hustle to stay ahead of that, which I think I did a pretty good job of, actually.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, a former colleague said you were the George Bailey of StitchFix, always putting off your own plans to tend to the needs of the company. And I think constantly stepping in to fill roles, to do things on behalf of a company that you obviously cared so deeply for. And I know those were always easy decisions for you. Is that idea of sacrificing for the greater good of the business to step in where needed the attitude that everyone needs to have and should have at a startup?
It's a really interesting question, because I do think of myself as a humble, try to be a servant leader. But there's also a selfishness to those decisions that comes from, I'm stepping in because at the time I think that was the best answer for the company. And I'm, not going to be a CEO because I can actually be at a company that's going to be really successful, and being a number two to really successful company is better than being a CEO of a company that's not that successful. And so it's not all altruistic. I mean, to be clear, I'm like doing the calculations of like, am I the right person for this job? And is, like, if we're going to win as a team, is it going to be something that I'm going to be really proud of, sort of being a part of? And as a result of that, I feel like, you just, I do think you have to, going back to your question, you have to be willing to do any role that you think you can have positive impact, even if it's times like not the role that you wish you were doing at the time, or the role that you love doing, at the time. Like, you just have to be someone that is adaptable and agile enough to do these jobs, because as you know, just as well as I do, when you're in an early stage company, like, there are firefighting you're doing, You are never doing the job that your job description, if you had a job description, which most people don't even have a job description, you're never doing what your job description says. And if you don't have this kind of flexible mindset, it's just not the right, early stage companies aren't the right thing for you. But I don't want it to be, I don't want the perception to be like I was always willing to do whatever for whatever reason. I think I was always pretty intentional about like, is this something that I can learn? Am I the right person for it? And is it going to be accretive to shareholder value and to the people that are, spending all their time being a part of Stitch Fix? Is me in that job going to be helpful to kind of all of those situations? And I think we, made pretty good decisions as it relates to that. But I definitely went through that calculus each time. Like, am I the right person? And is this something that where the company needs me in this role at this time?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And look, and I think for a lot of people, the idea of going to a startup can be intimidating, also in part because they have families, because they have kids. When you joined Stitch Fix, your daughter was, I think, just starting kindergarten. How did you find success being a husband, dad, and early stage operator? And what was the kind of Mike approach to figuring out how to make all those things work?
Boy, big question. And big question because, you're a dad and a husband and have had really big, stressful, amazing, growth jobs. And I do fundamentally think it's really hard to be quote unquote an A plus in all of them all the time. I think it's really hard to be an A plus father all the time, an A plus husband all the time, an A plus work all the time. I think you are trying to like sort of be balanced in it. I know people have big arguments about work-life balance and is it possible? I'm in the fluid camp where I do think it kind of it moves in and out of work and life. And my daughter Marley, as you reference, would come into work with me, and she got to learn about entrepreneurship and got to know Katrina and the team. And I think there's really powerful life lessons that came from that. I think tactically, what a few things I tried to do. One is give myself grace when I wasn't an A plus or even an A minus in one of those things. And I think you do have to give yourself grace. Be accountable, but give yourself some grace that it's really hard to do all these things at a high level all the time. So that's one. I think the second thing is, be in constant communication with your partner on what you're trying to do. So if Kelly wasn't pro working at an early stage company and allowing me to work as hard as I was trying to work and do the things we were trying to do and travel and all the things that are required to sort of build a successful company, then I wouldn't have done it because I care deeply about our relationship and I really trust kind of her advice and her thoughtfulness about whether it's going to work for our family. So again, got buy-in from her, like let's go for it. And it wasn't always easy, but we would review this regularly to make sure that it was quote unquote working for our family. And then Marley was at an age that really allowed her to participate in sort of seeing what an early stage company is like. And I was just on a call, a couple hours ago with an entrepreneur who cares deeply about just the craft of entrepreneurship and how he's involving his family. And I was just lucky that I had a family, both in a wife and in a daughter, that was really interested in early stage companies and what they could do. And so I don't know. I think give yourself grace, have intentionality around the conversation with your partner and your family, and then hope that like it's the kind of thing that they're excited about too, even if you're going to be gone a lot or working pretty hard.
Yeah, no, I agree with all those. One of the things I'm fond of saying, and people have heard me say all the time, is whether you like it or not, you're bringing your entire support ecosystem and infrastructure with you, and whether they're kicking or screaming or they're brought into the decision. And so, better if they're brought into the decision and understand, and they can come along the journey with you together with the organization that you join. So
Yeah,
makes total sense.
it's such an important, like what you just said, I think is so important. And I think there are enough families that don't do it and it's a kicking and screaming and not sort of buy-in. And I think the right way to try to do it is to sort of have these like family conversations about it and try to express like what are the going to be the amazing things about it and what are going to be the potential hard things about it, and are we as a family up for the harder days that are going to happen as it relates to starting a venture firm like you have and I have, or being at an early stage company.
No, and I think it's on the company as well if they're smart to try and get to know the family as well and
Yes.
get buy-in, especially in those early days. I tell founders we partner with all the time as they're recruiting early employees, like who's around the person,
Mhm.
who does she turn to at night after a hard day's work? Do they have kids? What do they enjoy doing? Because if you can bring them along as well and they're excited and they're asking about it, all the better,
Yeah.
especially during the tough times. Some of my favorite moments at Point were when we had the big Halloween party and got all of the families, all of the kids together, and we'd dress up, do potluck, and we could all fit in one office. It was so much fun. And I think it really helped all of us early employees feel like everybody is along the journey together and we've got the backing and support of our families too.
That's
So
amazing. Someone told me this, and I don't think I've ever really done it, but this idea that, like, if you're in a performance review at your company, like having your boss ask you, like, what does your partner say about your job? What does your partner think is what you love about your job and what you don't love about your job? And it's a good way to kind of understand, like, how much of this are you bringing home?
yeah,
What is your partner thinking about like the job that you're in, and like trying to have it be more open to like, yeah, I actually care what your family thinks about where you're going to work and how you're
yeah,
showing up every day, because it's hard. If you have a tough day, I mean, I'm not so good at
compartmentalizing.
compartmentalizing
Yeah,
things, where if I have a tough day at work, it's not like I can come home and be like Mr. Joy, happy person. I
absolutely
bring it
right.
all home, like I wear it on my sleeve in all cases. And so I think having your partner understand and your family understand like what this is, and being somewhat bought in, and just look for the most creative ways to do that, because I think it's important.
No, completely agree. So switching gears a bit from Mike's journey now to Stitch Fix's journey, nowadays companies are bringing AI to everything from restaurant reservations to customer success to booking tickets. And it seems new and novel, but the reality is it's been around for a long time, maybe going by different names. Stitch Fix was super early to the application of data science and technology with consumer experiences. And you brought together 100 data scientists on the team at one point, together with 5,000 stylists in order to create the perfect fit for every customer. Looking back, what did you guys get right, do you feel, about that approach, merging the art and the science? And knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently
Hmm.
about that, the approach that you took?
I think we got a lot right. I think we got a lot right because of a few different foundational principles that Katrina had. I'd say what we got right was not having stylists just work in a silo, or data scientists just work in a silo, or merchants just work in a silo. We had an overarching kind of thesis that there would be no queen or king functions at Stitch Fix. So like, at Walmart, the truth was is that merchandising and ops essentially were queen or king functions, and all many other functions supported the work of merchandising and operations. At Stitch Fix, we tried really hard to not have king or queen functions, because you wanted data science to be, you know, you wanted data science to be involved in all parts of the business. We saw opportunities for data science to work in merchandising and ops, in finance and styling, obviously, as you recognize. So I think we got a lot right, because we were very intentional about knowing that it was art and science and it wasn't one dominating over the other. We were very intentional about sort of the functions not having king or queen. Um, I think the things that we may have gotten wrong, and this is a hard one because not sure I have an answer for what I would have done differently, is I think when you have that many data scientists and that many engineers, I think we could have done a better job of making sure that all projects and all things we were working on, not all, but the majority of them, had a path to like, what is the ROI on this? Because it's just a lot of money you're spending in those two functions at that scale, that you want to make sure that you are doing a good job of driving like return on investment and good capital decisions. And I think we were probably could have been done a better job, and I could have done a better job as a leader to make sure that we were doing that. At the same time, you don't want to create so much like process around that, because then you lose the creativity and you lose the experimentation and you lose the fail things that like you will fail on that ultimately will help you make better decisions or be more successful in the future. So I think we got a lot on this art and science and data science right. And the only thing I would say that I would tweak going back at it would be trying to figure out how do you have a little bit more balance on return on investment while not killing creativity and opportunity to kind of let data scientists and engineers kind of explore and experiment.
Yeah, I mean, you've always been about, I think, letting the people at the front line make the decisions and be close, those who are closest to the decision, let empower them to make the decision. You know, part of the culture that you created at Stitch Fix. On that subject, given you had such a diverse range of people at the company, engineers, data scientists, warehouse employees, stylists, thousands and thousands of people in different locations, how did you build that unified culture? For a lot of people, that's three separate companies. Even
Hmm.
what worked for you, and especially in today's day and age where people are now bringing technology, data science, AI to a lot more applications, bringing it into the warehouse, bringing it into the real world. What advice would you give around creating a harmonious culture across groups that are otherwise pretty diverse?
Yeah, I think it starts with caring, like caring that you want a culture to not have three different cultures at three different locations or across different functions. Just try to have one culture. I think caring matters. I think being intentional about how you're going to execute as you're scaling the company that quickly, trying to keep the culture as one culture. Those are the two things I'd start with. I'd say on the execution thing. We did a few things that I think were special and helped give us a chance to have that culture kind of extend across 10,000 people and very different jobs. And obviously geographically too, we had warehouses all over the country. We opened a UK office, and we didn't want when you went to the UK office or went in the warehouse to feel like you're at a different company. And so the things that we did, I think, well, or at least were intentional about. One is the onboarding experience when you first came to Stitch Fix and learned about the company was pretty standard across all of people that were joining the company, and in many cases included like Katrina speaking to new employees, and sometimes me speaking each function, talking about like why their function mattered to all employees. So that was one. I think having that onboarding experience, never get kind of outsourced from away from the founder. And so that was one. I think the second thing that we did, and we really encouraged and she led in this way of like going and visiting warehouses and going and visiting kind of the geographies where we had density of stylists, and doing the styling leadership conference where we would bring stylists together and the senior team would come and speak at those conferences. Katrina would always go to those conferences as well. And so I think these in-person touch points that we did, and again, I was there, you could do it pre-COVID, like you just went and spent time with people. That was a second thing that we did. And then a third thing that we did is like we had three things we hired for, four core values and five leadership attributes that we really said this is what leadership at Stitch Fix looks like. And for to help people understand those core values and the leadership attributes, the senior team would teach the class on those leadership attributes or the core values of the company, and we would get amazing help from Margot, the head of people, and our leader, learning and development team. But the classes were taught by Katrina and me and Jeff and Eric. And I think when you see the senior people teaching the classes on core values and principles and taking time to do that, it just speaks to like how important those things are. And it gives you a better chance to like have the culture extend beyond 150 people, which everyone says when you get over 150 people, you can't have your culture. It's going to blow up. It also helped us extend across geographies, as I said, and across functions. Again, we weren't perfect at it, but I think those were some of the things that we tried to do that gave us a chance to have a culture that extended to 10,000 people.
Was there anything that you did either in cross-functional interviews or team visits and offsites to really bond the team after they onboarded and joined, and kind of give people that collaborative sense of we're all working at StitchFix and we're all in this together?
I think we didn't do a good job of that, actually. I think we trusted that the onboarding and the leadership would be sort of enough. And I think we could have done a better job, frankly, of having new touch points that would sort of bring back the collaboration, and have like the merchandising team regularly go down to the warehouse to see how much more product that was coming in than was planned, how it affects the warehouse, or have the warehouse team spend time with the merchandising team on like, if we didn't hit our service levels with getting product in, how much that hurt their sales and hurt their happiness with their job. And I think we could have done like had more intentionality across the post onboarding and the post leadership training that would have helped kind of ingrain the culture at an even higher level. So that's a good, if I was going back and doing it again, I would do exactly what you just suggested.
Well, and you guys went through immense scale. What did product market fit feel like at StitchFix?
I mean, now as a venture capitalist, I tell a version of the story a lot because people are like, huh? Product market fit was high at Stitch Fix. We got to somewhere between $200 and $300 of top line without spending any or very little money in marketing. That says to me that we had high product market fit. And I think we had high product market fit because it was an amazing product and amazing service. And we worked really hard to do that. So there was some execution in what, there was the idea that I thought was a phenomenal idea. There was how algorithms work to help make sure that we were matching great product with what the customer's needs and desires were. There was like making sure that you shipped on time and that they would have this unbox experience that felt like a gift to themselves. Those are all things that were within our control that we had to execute to have a chance to keep product market fit or keep excitement. But there were some inorganic things and some things we didn't even like. The retail was struggling at the time. There was less of a customer kind of focus, I think. We had a lot of benefits of being part of an early generation that leveraged quote unquote influencers and creators before creators were getting hit up by every company about doing things. And so that was more luck. But we had product market fit like I've never seen before. I certainly haven't seen it in my 3.5 years in venture. And we I think underestimated how lucky we were to have it. And it was amazing. So I know what great product market fit looks like now. And obviously, you hope that some of the companies you invest in get some good luck with tailwinds like that.
Well,
That kind of
so you know what it looks like. Maybe if there are any stories or moments that come to mind about what it felt like you're in the office, you're seeing the dashboards, you're looking
yeah,
at them weekly. It's like,
yeah,
man, we're onto something here. What did product market fit feel like
yeah.
at Stitch Fix?
It felt like you're sitting in a room with 10 other people and it's just a feeling of hustle. Like we have
Okay.
so much demand that we all have to hustle to keep up with it. It felt like physically walking into a warehouse 1 month and seeing 40,000 square feet of clothes and then 6 months later seeing 90,000 square feet of
Okay.
clothes. You're like, oh, okay, this is growing. You could physically see it.
Yeah.
You could physically walk into the warehouse, your first warehouse where it was pretty quiet and maybe 20 workers, to now you have 200 workers in a warehouse, and there's music playing and there's like super high energy.
Sure.
So there, I think your point is a good one, because there is a feel to it, that feel is infectious. That feel is hard to replicate. That feel actually helps you retain top talent, because it's like, wow, this is a really special place when you feel product market fit. And I think it's harder in a non-physical business. Obviously, in,
Sure.
in retail, you can feel it differently, the goods and the bads of the feel, than you can in just a pure software company. But we definitely felt it, and it was a pretty awesome, daunting at times and exhausting at times, but a pretty awesome feeling.
Well, and it's interesting, right? Because if you think about the centers of intelligence in the human body, the head, the heart, and the gut, so often there's like a gut feel of, oh yeah, okay, something is working
Yep.
here. I know I can't really put my finger on it. I can't tell you why, but
Yep.
I feel it, and then the rest starts to catch up. Oh, this is why, and you can explain it and actively talk about how do we keep it going. And
Yes.
so some of those moments are so key to your point about retaining the talent, building the excitement, getting the buzz and the energy going within an organization.
Yeah, and I think what you touch on there too is like that gut feeling that something is working. Like there's so many positives that you see with early stage companies, that gut feeling drives them to take more risk in a way that's actually the right risk to take.
Yeah.
But you also can't be so delusional that if you feel in your gut but your head doesn't match and the analytics don't match, that you just plow through anyway because your gut's saying you feel it. There has to be a good balance between those things. But I think the kickstart of like leaning into the feeling in the gut is like, oh, I do feel it in my gut. Like I feel like we've got something here. And when you see a founder kind of, go over to that level of confidence, and then are able to execute on like, wow, we've got something, it's a really special thing to watch.
Yep. Well, look, at StitchFix, you were helping style individuals, but you definitely had a goal of knowing your customer better than anyone else in the world, styling or not. Do you think you guys fulfilled on that goal?
Hmm. I think more than not, but I think it's a good challenge and nudge that like, what could we have done better and what's helpful for founders in this ecosystem when you're not fully meeting the customer experience. I mean, the model was you fill out a style profile, you from that style profile we could sort of figure out what 5 items would work for you, and we'd have the stylist pick the last 5 items after an algorithm ran. But you still need like this idea of, you get so much data from the style profile and from checkout from so many customers that it felt like if you don't get it right, like they've spent so much time like investing in Stitch Fix, like it was very disappointing. And one of the things that we would see in churn data was like, you didn't listen to me, was like the biggest like painful churn reason for us. It wasn't didn't fit. It was like you didn't listen. And the way we interpreted that was, uh, we had a customer spend a lot of time, and we didn't take that time. Like we didn't value their time. And in a world where like the world is moving so fast and there's not enough time for anyone to do anything, when you hear you're not listening to me and you equate that to not valuing your time, it's pretty damning and damaging to process. And we took those things really seriously. So we did a really good job most of the time with customer experience, but when we missed, boy, did it hurt. And there was no excuses for it because of how much time and data, how much time people had spent to give us like a lot of information to help us be really good at the job. And also, just like again how much data we had to help risk reduce being wrong about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys were so insistent and persisted with the matching of people and algorithm stylists and data science. In this world we're living in today, AI is everywhere. It feels like we're getting simultaneously more personal and less personal at the same time.
Yeah.
How should companies think about AI and that customer experience, delivering that amazing customer experience? And what is the role of humans in delivering that service?
I still feel strongly that even in the world of AI, at least the way I've experienced it in the last couple years, that you do need a human in the loop to try to uh, have it be more personalized and more authentic. You said it well, Rishi, which is like, I think some of the AI makes it actually less personalized and more robotic, and you feel less in tune with what the customer is telling you. And I think you have to have a human in the loop in order to really understand like what are their like very specific tastes. And I don't know. I think AI has so much potential, but I think it's really important to make sure that we keep humans in the loop to understand the nuance of human behavior and the nuance of feelings. Like we would get feedback, and I trust that AI will do a lot of amazing things, but we would get feedback about a dress that someone got in their fix being something that they could wear with their partner who was coming back from the war in Iraq and or war in Afghanistan, and like capturing that feeling of feeling like I am excited to go out with my partner after they've gone, or coming back from war. I think it's really hard for an AI like kind of um, solution to capture the emotion of what that story and that feeling meant to that customer. So I just have thought that humans need to be in the loop in most of these things. And until I see someone capture like that level, or an AI tool or solution capture that kind of nuance, I'll believe that it still needs to be AI plus human.
Yeah. Well, switching gears a bit here now, since leaving Stitch Fix, you've gone on to co-found a venture firm with another dear friend in Nikhil Trivedi. Most people were not surprised to see you go start something, but I'm sure a few people were surprised that it was a venture firm. What led you to make the switch, and when did you know you'd be working with Nikhil?
So were you surprised?
I was not surprised, or it didn't surprise me, but it was not what I would have expected, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
The reason I ask is because in our mentoring relationship, I'm sure you heard me talk a lot about my feelings about the venture ecosystem
Yes,
and
sir.
some of the challenges that I had with the ecosystem. And a little bit of context: we were not at StitchFix able to raise our Series A. We talked to 60 plus firms, and everyone passed on it. And it wasn't just that they passed, because I recognize now, being in the seat, you only do 4 opportunities
Yep.
a year, and you see 400 opportunities. So the number of things you pass on is like very, very, very high. And so it wasn't that; it was more just the process and the way
Oh,
people
yes.
passed, and the way I felt like those meetings lacked kind of, I don't know, they
Empathy,
lacked empathy. They lacked like real work being done.
respect for
There were
founder
lots.
time.
Exactly. And it just felt like, oh, this is crazy. So fast forward to when Nikhil asked if I consider starting a firm with him, I really did think it was a little crazy for him to ask, because just like you knew, he knew that I didn't love the ecosystem. But in very kind of classic fashion, instead of, talking about all the things you find challenging, why not try to get involved and have a small, sort of positive impact in ways that you think
Yes,
you
sir.
would have wanted to be treated if you're, being on the other side. And that's what we're trying to do. So the main reasons that I chose to do this with Nikhil, I'll start with first him. Similar to Katrina, I just met and had spent time with someone who was like really talented. We had been on a board together. We had gotten to know each other outside of that board on core values and principles. Felt aligned on those things, and he's just a really special human. And so, like to get the opportunity to kind of build a firm and learn venture from someone I really respected and thought was phenomenal at his job was like one of the main drivers for doing it. I think the other two were really kind of a combination of like, I just love founders. I just
Yep.
love like the positivity they have. I talk about founders on the scale of crazy to delusional. I prefer more crazy, like every founder is crazy to like start your own company.
Oh, yes.
Delusional is harder for me to kind of get my head around sometimes because I want truth seeking in our relationship. And I think founders just have this like, ultimately optimism and contrarianism that like is like, I want to build something that just has to be in this world. And that kind of like feeling from a founder is infectious to me. They're really smart, most of them. And so it's fun to be around really smart people. So like this founder thing was the second. And then the third was feeling like I had something to give in this ecosystem, having been a part of a company that, yes, had a lot of success, but had to go through the ringer from a fundraising
Oh, yeah.
perspective, from a company building perspective. It was really, really hard. And feeling like I had best practices and worst practices in company building that I could share with founders that gave them a little bit of a chance to have a little bit of an edge if I kind of did venture at a really high rate. And so it was Nikhil plus loving founders plus having something to give that made me feel confident that I wanted to do the job. As you know better than I do, it's really hard to tell whether you're good at the job. And the feedback loops are so long, and you don't get like every day in my old operating job, I got a scorecard of whether I was having a
Oh,
good day or
yeah.
a bad day when you're in ops and retail, and you just don't get that in venture. And so the psychology of keeping yourself up and trying to feel like you're taking a step forward and doing the job well is been it's been a thing. But I'm grateful that I get to do it with Nikhil, who's been doing it for 12 years or 13 years, and he can help be my therapist as well as my partner.
Those are always the best relationships,
Yep.
and I think you guys obviously off to an amazing start with Footwork, and so grateful to be able to partner with you guys as well. Last couple of questions here. What is Smell-O-Vision?
Smell-O-Vision was a company that I worked for that was a disaster. It's still considered one of the worst companies of the dot-com bust. And we were trying to bring a box that plugged into your computer that produced smells to market. And guess what? It didn't work. And so I learned a lot about failure, frankly, of being there for a year and a half and recognizing like what's the right criterion for me to consider joining a company, and it needed to be more robust than my criterion for joining Smell-O-Vision. And so one of my favorite stories about this company, which happened well after, is my boss after I left this company was this guy Dave Limp, and Dave used to at industry events yell down the hall, "Hey, that's Mike Smith. He used to work at Smell-O-Vision." And I took a chance on him and gave him a second opportunity, and like in a very public way, make fun of my mistake. But what's amazing about like startups and what's amazing about this ecosystem is it really allows you to fail and get back up and dust yourself off and find the right thing. And it's not like anyone loves failure or certainly doesn't love losing money, but it is an ecosystem that really, I think, supports innovation and supports risk taking and supports change and supports growth. And so I feel really lucky to have been out in the Bay Area for coming up on 30 years and seeing all of those attributes be something that I'm just really attracted to.
No, that's great, and a great place to end. One former colleague of yours, and I'm going to read it so I don't mess it up. Former colleague of yours told me your superpower is to be able to drive an organization to get things done, but do so in a kind, human way where people want to keep working with you. I've experienced that and felt it over our many, many years of friendship. It's a great trait for an operator and an investor, and it's no surprise to see you continue to be successful in this new role. And anybody who gets the chance to work with you, I'm sure is going to be better for it. So thank you, Mike, for joining me today. What should people be reaching out to you about? What opportunities are interesting for you these days, and how should they get in contact?
Yeah, so we do seed and Series A investing. We like to lead rounds. We write checks between 2 and 10 million. We're a generalist firm, so we like a lot of things. But the key is early signs of product market fit and a founder that believes that whatever they were put on the earth to do was to build this company. And so you can find me at just mike@footwork.vc. Just email me. I'm active on LinkedIn, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And excited to meet founders that are building really interesting businesses that ultimately need some capital along the way.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Rishi.